So I've been thinking about this thing for a while now, actually, and I thought I should just talk about it for a little bit. But it's like a stereotype that artists, no matter what medium they work in, right? It's like whether you're a writer or whether you're like a painter or a sculptor or whatever. Like they always say, like an artist is their own harshest critic, right? That's like the stereotype that gets pushed around. It's like no matter uh, who you show your work to, chances are you're going to be the one that critiques it the most, right? But you're not going to like say it publicly, so other people can't know that it's you that's critiquing your work the harshest. You're being like unreasonably harsh on your own work just because it's your work and you want it to be better and you want to be better as an artist and you want your work to be better than it is usually, no matter how good it is. And this is one of those sentiments that gets pushed around a lot. And how much merit does it actually hold, right? How much merit and where does it come from? So that's what I was thinking about, like all of today. Basically, I was thinking about this, and it's like when you're getting started at whatever thing you're doing, that's the worst you're ever going to be at that thing that you're doing. That's the worst that you're ever going to be, right? Because you're always going to get better no matter what, even if you're not actively trying to get better. Chances are that you're probably still going to get better just because of repetition, right? To some extent, you're still going to get better to some extent just through doing it again and again. So that first time you do something, or the first time you make a video, the first time you write something, the first time you sing a song, whatever you do, that's the worst you're ever going to be. So that's the time when you're, and this is the thing. That this is another cliche, but I think it applies here better than the other one. It's like they say that you don't really need to have talent to be good as an artist. You just need to have good taste and a willingness to improve, right? I threw that last bit in. It's just the first bit. You need to have good taste. You don't need talent. Because what they say is if you have good taste, that means that you know what constitutes good work, like what constitutes a good sculpture, what makes a good book, what makes a good video, whatever. You know what you like. That's the most important part. Because if you know what you like, that means you can work toward that nonstop. So if you know what you like and you start out and you make something that seemed so good in your head, like you had this idea and you were like, oh my God, this is an amazing idea. It's going to be the best thing ever, whatever you do. And you're like, okay, let me make this and it's going to be amazing. And then you make it. Let's say you put a lot of work in, you try really hard, you make it, and it comes out shit because it's the first time you're doing whatever you're doing. And that's understandable. The first time you make a souffle, it's not going to be amazing, right? You have to do it again and again. And if the souffle is the first thing that you're trying to make when you try to cook, I would not recommend it. It's pretty hard. But yeah, the first time you make whatever, it's going to be the worst that it is, barring some freak accident. Maybe cooking isn't the best analogy here. The first time you make a video, it's going to be horrible. The quality of the capture is going to be bad. You won't have your lights turned on. Your camera will be like slightly off angle. Your face won't be in the center of the frame. Like so many things could go wrong, and likely all those things will go wrong when you're doing it for the first time. That's understandable. But if you look at that and you go, oh, this doesn't look like all the videos that I watch. This doesn't look like my favorite 8 million sub YouTuber. I think it's 9.3. I think you know who I'm talking about, particular fellow with sunglasses. This doesn't look like one of their videos. How come? Well, it's because it's your first time. And if you let that discourage you from making any more videos, that's as good as it's ever going to be. The next time you make it, if you take a long break between your first and second video, the second one's going to be just as bad. If you make one video a year, you're only going to get better at a rate of one video per year, right? So you're not going to get much better. It's going to take you way longer than someone who's making 3 videos a week and like dedicating themselves to get better at their craft, right? Like get better at their editing, get better at their shot composition, get better at their lighting, all those things. There's so many things that go into making anything. I'm just using like a vlog as an example here. I hope that's clear. But there's so many things that go into making anything marginally better, because nobody gets amazingly better overnight. It's a process. And part of the process is doing it again and again. So you can't get discouraged that your first thing that you make is shit. Or maybe you go the opposite way. Maybe the first thing that you make is actually really good, like surprisingly good. And it puts a lot of pressure on you that the next thing you make has to be even better, right? Like this is an example that happens a lot in the publishing industry. I think the first time an author writes a book, it's really good, or it's like surprisingly good, and it wins them like a best debut award or like best new author award or something like that. And then they get scared, they get paralyzed because of the pressure. This pressure that they put on themselves, maybe from the readers too, if it sold a lot of copies, but usually it's pressure that you put on yourself that's ever present, because you can detach yourself from the pressure that gets put on you by external sources. The pressure that you put on yourself always is with you. It's in your head, right? So they put all this pressure on themselves. It's like, I have to do better the next time. But the thing is, you're putting all this pressure on yourself. It's going to make it harder for you to do better the next time because you have unreasonable expectations. So what do, right? You have to keep working. You can't stop. You can't let your first book be your only book. You have to just do it. You have to do it, make it as good as you can to the best of your ability. And maybe you don't capture lightning in a bottle twice, but hey, you tried, right? Isn't that worth something? And you could say it's not, that only the quality of the art is worth something. But if you think that only the quality of your art is worth something, which is completely subjective, by the way, and your perception of the quality of your own art can change based on how you grow as an artist. Like what you think is amazing now may not be something that you think is amazing 2-3 years from now, just because of how you've grown and what you do then compared to what you do now, right? That's possible. So if you're like determined to just judge how good you're progressing as an artist based purely on the quality of your art, you're limiting yourself to some extent, right? Because you won't even see the art that you create today the same way in 5 years. So if you're just going to get down on yourself because you did so well the first time, and the second time, or you just think that you're not doing as well, so you don't even let yourself work the second book or whatever, you just get stuck mentally just because you're in your own head. You're telling yourself like, oh, no matter what I do, it's not going to be the same. I can't tell the same story again, or tell the same quality of story again. It's just not going to happen, right? So you get in your own head and you convince yourself that it's not going to be good enough no matter what. So you have all this pressure in your head that's not allowing you to create, right? And I think I speak for a lot of creators when I say this, that pressure is one of those things that if you're uncomfortable with your position, like let's say you've been working at a YouTube channel for like a year, you're putting out videos like 2-3 times a week, there's always that pressure to get the next upload up, but it's a familiar pressure, right? Because you're used to it by now because you've been doing it for 52 weeks or whatever. So you're like used to the fact that, okay, this video has to be done in 2 days. That's familiar pressure, but you're putting all this pressure on yourself that you have to actually make something. Like if you have to write a whole book and you have this pressure hanging over your head the whole time that, oh, hey, I won a best new author award or whatever. Now you're expected to either improve or be the same. No one expects people to get worse, right? Negative trajectory is not really something that is respected or is even acknowledged in our modern society, I would say. And you could go into a whole philosophical thing about this, but positive trajectory is the norm. So if you do something good the first time, the next time you're expected to do great. Doing just good is a flat, right? Is flat. And in capitalism, if you're not growing, you're stagnant. Stagnant is bad. We know that. So how do you tell yourself that it's okay? How do you remove that pressure off yourself and just allow yourself to create, right? And this is one of those things that a lot of people talk about all the time as one of the hardest things to do as a creator, is to remove yourself from that mind space of I think in general, pressure for anybody's pressure to perform is just a giant anvil that hangs over your head and it's hard to remove, but it's something that you have to do. And for different people, it could take different shapes, different forms, right? For me, this is maybe not the most healthy thing in the world, but what I do is I just sleep really late. And I think it's actually a pretty common practice for people when they get stuck on something. They just wait, or they don't sleep until they get it done. I'm not saying it's I won't sleep until this is done. Don't stay up for 60 hours or whatever. I'm saying if you go to bed at 9, usually I stay up until 2 or 3 in the morning, and then eventually my brain is dulled down to a point where the inhibitions just disappear, right? And other people use other kinds of methods to tackle their inhibitions. I probably don't have to mention them by name. There are many famous inhibitor removers in the world, right? So they do that as their kind of I'm not going to say excuse, but as their way to remove the pressure from themselves and allow themselves to create in a mind state where they're not actively thinking about what the work has to be, where they can just focus on the work itself, right? And I think that's kind of an important thing to learn how to do, and to learn it's part of your creative process, I would say, because like I mentioned earlier, like having good taste is important, right? And no one can define good taste. Good taste is just whatever you like. Whatever you like, it's subjective, it's personal, and it's very important that it is subjective and personal. It can't be objective, because taste is not objective, because art is not objective. That's just a fact. So when you have this good taste, quote unquote, like the stuff that you like and you know what you like, you're going to model your work so that you like it. That's generally how it works. So what was I saying? I got lost in my train of thought again. Okay, yeah. So you remove the creative pressure from your head and just allow yourself to focus on the work and create, right? Then the creative process has to allow for that. You can't be like, oh yeah, I like being creative, but I just hate it when it becomes so hard for me to write something, because that's part of the project. I mean, not part of the process. When you create, you have to accept that there's going to be this pressure, and it's actually a good thing. You have to embrace it, because without that pressure, you're just going to stay stagnant, like we talked about, flat trajectory. And nobody likes flat trajectories. If anything, if the last 167 years of industrialization and capitalism have taught us anything, it's that I just drew a blank again. Man, I guess this coffee is like doing a number on me. Anyway, if these years have taught us anything, it's that it's been ingrained into our head that flat trajectories are bad. So even if you tell yourself that it's okay, if it's the same level as my previous stuff, like inside you're going to be like, oh God, it's bad because I didn't improve, right? There's always going to be that. Maybe that's just me, but anyway, that's like a thing that can affect you. So the only way to address it is like to remove the expectation at all. And that's like basically impossible to do, because even like very prolific creators haven't solved that problem ever. It's like one of the hardest problems to solve, and you can never solve it, because once you make your work better, the pressure increases. So whatever you were using to cope with the pressure that was at a lower level before doesn't work anymore. You have to do something else. So it's like always going to be a struggle, and you just have to accept that it's going to be a struggle. You may not like the struggle. I mean, who likes struggling, right? But it's part of the process. When you make things and you actually actively want to improve the things that you're making, you have to accept that there's going to be this pressure. And however you deal with it, like whether you drink before you start writing to remove some of the inhibition of writing to get the words down on the page, whether you go for a walk, whether you climb a mountain, whether you travel around the world, like a lot of people do that. They travel everywhere so that they're always in a new environment, so they don't feel trapped by their old environment. They can forget their old worries and just create what they want to do. I know people do that. Or you can just simulate an altered state by staying up late like I do. Whatever you do, there are all ways to deal with the inhibitions that you have, like that fear of getting your work down on the page, right? Because that's what it is. When there's nothing down, you don't know if it's good or bad because it doesn't exist yet. So just the act of bringing it into the world defines it. And when you're defining it, you're limiting it in a way, because when it exists only in your head, it's not limited by anything. It's just an idea, and ideas are infinite, right? An idea could be anything. An idea can change from moment to moment. An idea doesn't matter, right? An idea in itself is just a concept, and a concept is of no use in the real world, really, unless it's applied somehow. So when you're making this work, you're applying the idea that you have, and that's what's so scary. It's because when you have this idea in your head, you think, oh, this is an amazing idea. But the process of getting it down, like onto the page or onto your software or into like forming it out of clay or whatever you're doing, that is the process that defines it, that limits it, that will ultimately determine how good it is eventually, how good it is when it's done. Because once the first word is down, the other words have to follow. Otherwise, you haven't done anything, and that's a failure in itself. It's just a whole series of fears, and that's why I listen to Harmontown a lot. It's supposed to be a comedy podcast, but like most of Dan Harmon's work, it's like 50% comedy, 50% way too deep insights into his life. I know more about his fetishes than I would reasonably like to, but that's something you take because he talks a lot about his creative process and how deadlines for him are like not a thing, and that's like the not traditional, that's like the counter narrative way. It's like, oh yeah, deadlines, what are those, right? I like what is that quote? I love the sound they make as they whoosh by, or something. So it's like he has a lot of struggle with this too. So you can see that it's like a universal problem, and he talks about it a lot, and his way to deal with it is he drinks a lot. Maybe that's not the healthiest way to deal with it. I certainly haven't found a healthy way to deal with it. Maybe there is no healthy way to deal with it. Hey, how do we know, right? We can only do the best that we can. So it's like the third time I got stuck. I was just like reach the end of the sentence and then I'm just lost. What was I talking about? Yeah, okay. So you're creating, you want to do good. That's the fear. That's the primal fear. That's the primal fear at the bottom of all of this. That's the reason why you have writer's block or whatever. It's because you're scared to do badly. But if you don't do anything, you're already doing badly because you're not being productive. So maybe you should use that fear to counteract the other fear, or maybe you just get stuck in a valley of fear. I don't know. This is just some thoughts that I had. Maybe not useful, but I think it kind of I think it explains to me at least why sometimes I get stuck. I don't want to say stuck creatively, but just stuck in a place where I know that I have to do something or that I have to make something, but I can't like summon up the motivation to do it just because of all the things that I said. Like you're either scared to do it or you're like, oh, I'm not going to be good anyway, so why even bother, right? I think that's like the absolute mentality that I'm trying to remove from myself as a person who wants to be creative, is that like lack of motivation to do anything, because anything that you do won't be good. Okay, I think that's enough of a rant for today, and thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode.